Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I am here with a very special guest, a friend, a colleague, and now an ally who I have known for several years, Andrew Duffy. Hi, Andrew. How are you today?
Hi, Rachel.
Good to be here with you. I want to share a little bit about who Andrew is, why he's on the podcast, and then we're going to get into it in terms of all things culture, leadership, and like how we pause and why breaks are important and all this cool stuff that we can actually apply. And then I think, as you know, with guests, I love to have them lead a pause, and Andrew's agreed to have us do that towards the end. So I'm super excited that we're going to do that. But first, Andrew, you are awesome. First of all, you're a vivacious spirit. And for over 15 years, his unique coaching has led people and groups to lives of love, vibrance, peace, play, and power. Just those things, not too much. As a culture architect for organizations, Andrew serves to bring more soul to people's work and workplace, catalyzing profound experiences, relationships, and results. I probably don't even need to explain now why you're on the podcast. But I want to share though why you and I and how we met. And so uh it's a it's a fun story for me to share, Andrew. I don't know what your version is because I haven't heard it, but basically I was your client. I hired Andrew at a gym. He was a personal trainer as I was first getting into triathlon, and he kicked my butt in good ways. And I ended up doing my Olympic distance triathlons. And Andrew, you were a great personal trainer, just for the record. So thank you for all of your support. And now here we are. It's 10 plus years, easily 15 probably years later. And we're
Yeah.
on the Pausecast, and we're going to learn more about what you do now. But do you have any other variations of that story?
Did we meet at Club One or did we do the private training
It was Club
at a
One.
studio? It
Yeah.
was? Oh man, that was my first training job ever.
Andrew was having me do the things that I've never even seen or knew about, like things with sticks and about balls and like all these kinds of random angles. And I was like, what am I doing? But then I realized I
Oh
was actually
man.
getting stronger. So thanks.
Wow, what a flashback to that time in San Francisco. That was around like that must have been around like 2009, 2010.
Yeah, it was around like right around 2009-ish, I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, so now we're flash forwarding to present time. I think you're on the East Coast. Where are you based?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia right
Yeah,
now.
you're in Richmond. I'm in San Francisco at the moment, and you are a cultural architect and leadership coach. So tell us what a cultural architect does. What and how did you come to do that from the world that you and I know each other from?
Sure. So the transition from being a personal trainer to cultural architect came through understanding that personal training wasn't wasn't really working to create some of the sustainable like long-term change that a lot of clients like you were coming to me to experience. Personal training is very much about telling people what to do and when and how. And when you and I were training, I think I've been training for about like a year and a half to 2 years. And that felt like the right thing. And I also knew that I was getting frustrated with other folks who weren't nearly as driven as you. Like you came in very motivated, you had a very specific plan and a goal. And there are a lot of folks who come in with some like general ideas. They don't have like a crystallized vision, but even when they do, sometimes they just let their life get in the way. And
Yeah.
I understood that just telling people what to do and when and how wasn't enough. And so I explored something that was coming about called health coaching. And health coaching explores the psychological underpinnings of behavior change as
Ooh.
well as the nutrition and fitness aspects, and like how do you create this like overall comprehensive plan. And so through a few different certifications, start to learn a lot more about how to listen and how to ask questions in powerful ways that had people really connect with their why and use their why to generate a more crystallized vision, and looking at how I could serve as someone who fills in the gaps and just continuing to ask questions to help them continue to discover and serve as that catalyst.
Hmm.
When I started working with some folks who had high level positions at organizations, I understood that they had an opportunity to impact the culture of their organizations. And a lot of them were coming into our work together, again, with those goals in mind of whether it was like weight loss, certain things related to health markers like blood pressure and cholesterol. whatever it was, sometimes they wouldn't follow through on it, and they'd be talking about how their work was just really weighing down on them. And I saw an opportunity to have a conversation with them and see if I could step into maybe altering what was going on at work. And that, at the time, I only really felt comfortable offering like fitness classes or something that was a little bit more hands-on in what I was qualified for. And then as I started to learn more about health coaching and the behavioral component, and also just diving into like large, mid, and small organizational settings, understanding that how people were acting and why had a lot to do with what people thought was expected or didn't know was expected, or didn't, basically the culture there, right? And how much they were invested in it or not, and why. And so the culture is the alignment of like the vision, values, and mission of an organization with the actions, right? So the actions expressing those things, and everything from how people talk to each other, the relationships they have, uh, benefits that are offered, email communication, how long lunch breaks are, or are there any, whether people can work from home or not, right? So like culture is the realization and manifestation of what those values are. And I realized that a lot of organizations were either saying that they had certain values and a vision for how they were going to follow through on like their service or product, or the way that their organization would run, and they wouldn't execute well on it, or they just didn't really have anything in place that offered the organization like guidelines or even an opportunity for conversation about how things can go. So that's when I started to explore becoming a culture architect, so that I could step in those moments and ask questions for leadership and the organizations to create those actions that matched with the mission, vision, and values, or to ask them questions that had them really dial into the mission, vision, and values for how they wanted their organization to run, and what they wanted their employee experience or service or product experience to look like. So that's what a cultural architect does. Again, is if the mission, vision, and values aren't crystal clear, helping the organization identify what.
Oh, I lost your audio there. I lost your audio. So can you
Sure.
repeat that last part? So if they don't have the vision, mission, and values put out, then you help establish that with them.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want me to say that again?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
good. That's good. I was just trying to making sure I understood it. And then
Okay.
that's what a culture architect does. So did you come up with this term and philosophy? I'm so curious. Is this something I could go out and look up in the yellow pages if I wanted one? Or like how would I?
Yeah.
That's really
Great.
cool.
So great question. It's a term that I discovered about 6 months ago. There's a gentleman named David J. Friedman who runs a podcast that I found on Spotify, uh, called the Culture Architects. And there's another gentleman named Darren Martin, Daren Martin, who's based out of New Orleans. He's the brother of someone that I met here in Richmond, who calls himself a culture architect as well. And so I started to see the term thrown around, and it just made sense for like what I'm doing to identify as that, because I'm working in the culture space, and an architect doesn't create the vision, but really listens to what people want to see, and what they want their experience to be like, and then offers guidelines, and then refines things based on the conversations to create a blueprint, right,
Yeah.
of what things can look like, and then also having it be flexible as things start to build. Because when you start to build things in real life, just like you do with like a house, right? So if you have architectural plans and all of a sudden there are some issues with it, like the architect has to be flexible and work with the builder, right? In this case, I think the builder is very much like part of the organization or the company. And just having those conversations about, okay, like this doesn't seem to be working, because sometimes it happens, right? Like people will try things on, like a new way of doing things, and it doesn't necessarily fit at that time. And so then we just pivot. But as long as there's a strong foundation based on the mission, vision, and values, and some really like core habits and ways of acting, then things are off to a great start.
Yeah. And wow, this is exciting. So not only is it something that I feel like the world is hungry for, right? Where many companies, maybe they're coming out of COVID, they're trying to figure out what is our culture now?
Mhm.
How do we navigate in a weird world now where there might be people remote and people hybrid and people at work? Plus that makes it harder. My sense is it makes it harder,
Mhm.
and establish a culture that is like fluent and fluid for what's needed in that company, because we're all going to have unique needs. And I think that's a great summary: vision, mission, and values. And it's exciting to hear that that's actually a term, and there's like thought leaders in the space, and you're part of that movement. And I feel like it's overdue, and what a cool way to contribute now, right? Raising your game of leadership from the more physical training side to aspects in culture and architecting that, creating the blueprints, which is awesome. I love that. So bringing this back to leadership, right? So thinking about, we're all in our own stews of culture in our own companies and doing things. So, as a leader, whether I'm a manager, whether I'm an individual contributor, or just someone who's in the culture, what would you say are things that I can be kind of helping with or contributing for, so that I can move the culture forward in this way, where it's like the vision and the values and the mission and the actions are kind of getting in alignment, or like where do you start, I guess?
That's a great question. Uh, what I've learned is that it really depends individually on the organization and the role and the person. So I've had the opportunity to work with a very large insurance company based in California that has, I believe, close to 8,000 employees now. And the way that their leadership handles things is different than the folks who work directly beneath them. And like they also have call centers, right? So, and call centers operate a lot differently than the folks in the legal department. So there are so many different ways for people with, even in just that organization, to think about how to approach culture. If more often than not, the culture isn't working for a lot of employees in some kind of way. It's one of the reasons why people end up getting burnt out and leaving organizations, is because there is a cultural misfit.
Yeah,
Okay.
heard that.
And like the recommendation that I have is like, no matter what role you are in, and no matter how new or how seasoned you are, now is the best time to just share something with someone that you work with. It could be someone who's working beneath you, alongside you, above you, whatever it is. And typically I'd say approaching and having the conversation with leadership, like this, like the person that serves directly with you or someone that you have a good relationship with, and having that conversation, so that people who are in a position of power are able to make those decisions. But either way, just starting to create a little bit of motion and conversation so that things can start to change. And I've seen it happen where folks who don't think that they're in the best position to start to create some of that change end up doing so. And their team and leaders recognize them for that. And it creates an appreciation for that person for saying things that other people have been thinking for a long time too. So someone sharing something and having the courage to do that, like if they have a sense of fear or if it just feels like the right thing to do, really can start to create a beautiful ripple effect. And so
It,
I would say, yeah.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, I can totally see that in a way that's a positive light, where you wouldn't think that it's necessary. I think culture is super, super underrated as it is, right? Because it's the last
Hmm.
thing usually that gets on an agenda. There's a million things of companies trying to do, or key results to get for the quarter, whatever it is. And culture tends to be like the after effect, or just like how
Right.
what I'm hearing from you is actually it can shape everything from productivity to performance and trust, right? And I know we're gonna work on that towards the end of this in our exercise, so I'm excited for that. But it's
Yeah.
it's really critical for creating a culture that will support all of us and move the company forward in ways that maybe things like toxic culture would take it down, or a person
Right.
isn't
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah. Everything you just said. And one of the biggest concerns that leaders have right now is like retaining excellent talent at organizations. And like I mentioned, if there's a cultural misfit, right? If someone who's extremely talented doesn't feel like they are appreciated, if they have an opportunity to contribute in certain ways, if their engagement is lacking, right? Like culture impacts that experience quite a bit. So to reduce turnover and retain really top quality talent, having a cultural fit and a culture that people want to be a part of is profoundly helpful, because top talent most of the time they actually like they would prefer to work for an organization whose mission, vision, and values they really buy into, and accept a little bit less pay because they just feel so at home, and and they feel fulfilled in what they're doing. And when that happens, and people feel like satisfied in their soul because they have good
Right.
relationships with their coworkers, and because they feel like they're doing something meaningful, like the only things that that knock them away from working for that organization usually is a life circumstance that they can't control. Like someone's, for example, like mom
Yeah.
has cancer and they need to go move in with them, right? Or whatever it is, like something traumatic that requires them to like fundamentally have to shift out. So the retention skyrockets, and everyone just has a better experience when the culture
Yeah.
significantly improves.
And so I have a pretty interesting follow up to that, because this is where my head goes. So I know there's a lot of folks right now who would probably think their culture could improve in some ways.
Mhm.
Uh, People in my mind are like, people coming specifically to my mind are just people that I know who are looking for jobs and they don't like where they're working right now. So if that's you, like if there's people who are listening right now and they are like, well, what do I do to actually get a culture, even in my own company, versus like going to look for one, because then I got to start all over again. Where do
Right.
what do I do if I feel like maybe there's micromanaging, or I don't feel like I have a say at this company anyway? Why should I bother changing the culture? Right? Like, what do you do when that happens? Because I feel like that's so many people right now. Agree? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's a great question. It really does depend on the organization. Like you're talking about, like having someone who's a micromanager like directly above you. A friend of mine had that situation in his sales team. So he's relatively new at his organization. He's only been there for like a few months, and his manager was micromanaging him and the rest of his sales team. And someone said something to someone else on the team, and they decided as a team to share what they were all experiencing, because it wasn't just the one person, right? And then they approached the micromanager's superior and said, "Hey, this has been going on for a little while," and that micromanager was he had a meeting with his superiors to talk about it, and the organization just decided to keep him, but just moved him somewhere else, just based on what his skill set was and what he was really good at. So the conversation started something that didn't really create a bad situation. It actually led to the sales team now having a better experience and a better manager, and the person who was micromanaging is now has a role that better fits their skill set, right?
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
so I, I would say like just start having some conversations in places that feel comfortable, and just start feeling it out, and having and making it a regular habit to have those conversations, because the more it's talked about, the more movement it's going to create.
Yeah, that, and then be the brave soul or worker who starts to have those conversations if they don't exist, right? And it can be a super small one over lunch, that could be like a colleague, just getting the feel for something. I think
Yeah.
that's where we all start, and that's a great piece of insight actually to take into that. Yeah. Awesome. So I know, speaking about teams and how we create cohesiveness and align more with the things you're talking about, Andrew, can you help us in our pause today for something that we can all kind of take away and try? I'd love to have a call to action for folks who want to maybe apply this, put this to work in where they are.
Sure. So Rachel, I love what you do with your pauses, by the way. Like, just your philosophy and your approach to it, I think is really wonderful. And so taking the spirit of taking the spirit of what you do and putting it in alignment with a lot of the work that I do, which has a lot to do with relationships, right? So relationships at work, and especially trust in those relationships, is paramount. It's oftentimes considered more important to have a high level of trust than it is to have a high level of performance within a team or organization, because the more you can trust someone to do something, even if they have a mediocre level of performance, you know that they're going to be able to follow through on it, right? And if they have a high level of performance, even better. But if you can't trust them and they have it, like even a savant level of talent, right, in the like top 1%, if they're not reliable and you can't trust them, then it's really not as meaningful. Like, they may not get the job done and you can't trust that it's going to get done. So I think that building trust and relationships is really key for anyone on a team, especially leaders. So I think a good pause that can help build trust is what I call a contribution pause. And that is thinking about someone that you work with or a team that you work with and what would absolutely light them up, whether it's expected or not. And if it's unexpected, even better. But just knowing that it would be something that they would greatly appreciate. It could be something related to acknowledgement, or it could be stepping in to do something for them that would be really helpful for them, right? So the exercise is thinking about a person or a group, thinking about what that action might be for them and why it would impact them in a really positive way. And then thinking about the structure of how you're going to support that action. So is it an action that you can do right now? If so, awesome. Go ahead and do it. But if it's something that's going to take a little bit of like planning or steps, my recommendation is find a structure like a calendar, post-it note, whatever it is that's going to remind you to follow through on that action later if you're not in a position to do it right now. So for example, like I'm not in a position to do something like I'm going to use the example. Like I know that my twin brother absolutely loves certain types of foods, right? He loves certain cupcakes from the spot in Richmond. And I'm not in a position to go do that right now. But what I can do is put a reminder on my calendar to go pick that up for him later and deliver it to him, right? And I know that he's going to be excited about that. I know that's something he's going to appreciate because I've done it for him before and it's worked out
He's
great.
going to be excited all over again.
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about like getting into his universe and what's going to light him up and might be expected or unexpected. So I did that for him this last Saturday with a friend, and it was unexpected, brought it by, and he really appreciated it. So,
Awesome.
so for the folks listening, so thinking about the person or group, what would light them up and why, and then putting the structure in place if you can't do it right now, and then following through on the action, right? So that's the 4 steps.
Yeah, I think the key there is the structure, like you're saying, where we have to have the structure there, just like in any pause, whether it's getting out of the house at 10 or making your bed or whatever it is, having an invite, right? Calendar invite or some kind of regularity so that you can stay on track with whatever it is. So, it's not about doing it often. It's about what works for you. That's the beauty of it. And what a powerful way to build culture, because it's about more than you. And I could see any leader, whether you're a leader of a team or just part of a team, who could be that ambassador who can say, hey, like, what if we did this? What if we tried honoring one person a month or a team once a month and celebrated them in some way and had a fun time or, whatever it might be. I've seen it a lot with birthdays. That was kind of our Google language, I'd say, when we had a birthday on the team. So once a month we'd have a cake, but it wasn't like really personal. I mean, we'd have cards and stuff, but what I think I like about yours is one layer deeper, where it's really personalized because it's that one person. And how cool would that be if you could feel that appreciated at work? I love that. Very cool. Way to build a team. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. You called it the contribution pause, contribution break. So everyone can take that away as a an action item to follow up with. So thank you for that, Andrew. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with in terms of culture and leadership, and just in terms of, any other insights of wisdom nuggets you'd want to plug right here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So creating or changing culture takes time. And there are there are a lot of organizations that like to do it in retreats, right? So retreats long term on their own have about a 20% success rate at creating some kind of change. That's not very good, right? So like the ROI on retreats is not fantastic, but what I found is that doing regular intervals of every 2 to 3 weeks, about 45 minutes or half an hour of something that can start to shift culture, especially with leadership. Like that's one of the things that I do with leadership teams over the process of like 6 months to a year, starts to create bite-sized habits and ways of doing things differently, instead of having it just be this like big, hey, we're going to shift everything and here's how we're going to do it. And and the point of that is every 2 weeks, like you learn or work on something and then you progress, right? So over the process of 6 months to a year, you make way more progress and a lot more people are on board with it and stay with that kind of a plan and program, instead of doing like a multi-hour day-long retreat or multi-day retreat. The conversation keeps going. It's very similar to training for like endurance events or any kind of sport. Like the most elite athletes in the world spend about 80% of their time in like a low level of work and working on skill, and 20% of the time doing stuff a little bit more intense.
I can attest to
But
that. I can definitely vouch. That's accurate description.
yeah, and so the idea is that you're doing things more frequently and working on this technique and skill to where it becomes like it becomes natural for you, as opposed to just doing this kind of like big like boot camp style thing for a period of time, and then like the benefits wear away relatively quickly.
Mm.
So my recommendation is that folks explore how to create that shift long term and do the bite-sized things, and just like be patient with it, right? Like it does take time for cultures to shift. For like there's more resistance with certain people within organizations with with just how certain structures are. So it does take time. And so for folks, to just have the conversation and be patient, and just talk with leadership and teams about developing these small habits over time that are alignment with the mission, vision, and values.
Yeah, and then if you don't have mission, vision, and values, you got to get those out probably first to
Right.
create the
Yeah.
aligned action. So yeah, thank you for that. These are all really great hot tips, we'll call them. Where can we find you? What if people want to work with you? How do they get in touch with you, Andrew? Because I think you've got so much to offer, and people would probably be really interested to reach out.
Sure. So my email is andrew@andrewkduffy.com. That's Andrew K,
I'll
like
put
the
that in
letter
the
K.
notes.
Sure, Duffy.com. And also my phone number, which we'll have in the notes as well. So those are the two best ways. And like any type of conversation about culture, any of the things that we've talked about on this podcast as well, happy to explore. And Rachel, just really appreciate you for having me on here, because I think a lot of the work that you're doing with leaders and having people take those pauses, like to be more productive and have a better like life and work experience, is really profound and powerful. And that's one of the reasons why we reconnected, right? Like
Yeah. I
almost
mean, we literally did.
almost 15 years later, because I saw on LinkedIn a notification about some of the stuff that you were doing, and it just like the spirit of what we're doing is so similar.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate what you're doing in trying to create a wonderful experience for everyone.
Yeah. So this is the culture pause, right? So if you're feeling called for how do I contribute to a culture pause or create that wave in ripple in my company, then this is the information that you need to know. And Andrew's your guy. So Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. It's totally an honor to have you here, and so fun to reconnect again.
It's my pleasure, Rachel.
Thank you.